Our approach to resilience often focuses on performing better or learning to collaborate better. And for ordinary challenges or everyday concerns, these approaches can be helpful. But let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because when it comes to trauma and loss, such approaches fall short and fly in the face of a different form of science, emotion science, which prevents people from fully healing.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Dr. Michele DeMarco, is an award-winning writer and published author in the fields of psychology, trauma, health, and spirituality. She's also a professionally trained therapist specializing in moral injury and resilience. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Politico, Boston Globe, Daily News, Psychology Today, and trust me, there's more. Her new book, Holding On to Air, The Art and Science of Building a Resilient Spirit, is available wherever books are sold. It's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show, Michele.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks so much.
Well, you bet. So let's dive in. You write about life throwing us up, as you say, a heaping helping of adversity, and we call into question our core values and who we are. Well, we have a sales audience listening. We have a lot of entrepreneurs listening. And their instinct, as is mine frequently, is when we have a heaping helping of adversity, we just dig in, fight harder. But the problem is often we're essentially moving back to what has been a failing strategy. How do we battle those voices in our head? When do we know that's a failed strategy? You're going to have to turn.
Sure. One of the things that a lot of business-based and positive psychology approaches to resilience do is they try to tell you that you need to just think differently about things. And all you have to do is change your thoughts. And people then fight against their thoughts and they try to clobber those difficult emotions that you're having with, no, I just need to push through this. No, I just need to, I don't want to be perceived as weak, so I'm just going to double down. And that is not a winning strategy.
Right.
So one of the things about resilience and the way I approach it is more at an embodied level. Resilience isn't just what's happening up here, it's what's happening completely in here. So there are what's called interoceptive awareness, which is basically understanding kind of all the things that are going on inside of you that may be actually triggering thoughts that may be unhelpful or actions that may be unhelpful, that like, I can keep going, I can keep going, I can keep going. And so one of the things that helps you get out of that is to actually be paying attention to what's going on inside of you, to figure out, geez, I'm really catching I'm noticing my heart is like racing. What's that trying to tell me? I'm really noticing that even like my posture, and I'm like, it's these inner sensations that we have can actually tell us a lot about what we're feeling, how they're influencing our thoughts, why we may be digging in down deeper. So
Yeah. I'm trying to remember Bob Newhart. That's who it is. Bob Newhart there's a famous clip, you can find it on YouTube, where he's a therapist and somebody's bringing a very difficult thing to him. And what's his response? Stop it. Right.
stop it.
He's $5 for this therapist, by the way. And he doesn't make change and you're not going to be here 5 minutes. It's a shame that doesn't really work, as we all know. So, but I'm hearing that stop it voice in my head because again, that's the knee jerk reaction on this side, on the side that I was raised by a Marine, on the side that said, get in there, this is when fighters fight, and don't quit, boy, things like that. Well, sometimes we have to listen to another voice.
Exactly. In this new book that I have, I talk about three harmful personas that get in the way of a person being able to be resilient, to build resilience. One is the survivor. And these are not new words, but they do actually really prevent resilience. So if you have a survivor mindset, you are just kind of like getting through life. You're doing whatever it has to take. You're surviving, but you're not living. And it's kind of like the walking wounded, because there's many ways to survive and not all of them serve us well. So picture something, a challenge in your life, whether that's a big meaningful one or just something, a daily annoyance or something. If you are just trying to like, I can't take it anymore, I can't do it anymore, I'm just gonna like get through it, muddle through it, grit through it. That's not opening you up and helping you to grow and turn something that was negative into something healthy and sustainable. It's actually just kind of like keeping the status quo going, and you just muddle along. So surviving doesn't always work because not all survivors are resilient. The second one is the victim. And victims are people who are defined by grievance and resentment, and they allow that energy, that negative energy, to fuel, feelings of discontent. And so people often, when difficulty comes up, they just become a victim. And that doesn't help you because you're not growing, you're not strengthening. One of the things about resilience is that it's not just despite, like a lot of people think they're resilient because despite the problem, like I beat the problem, I did this. One of the crucial areas, and I'll come back to the third one in a minute, but it's worth mentioning here. One of the distinctions about resilience that I make is the difference between overcoming adversity despite a challenge and overcoming adversity because of a challenge. So the despite kind of keeps you in a negative place. I did it. It's not a healthy fighting kind of attitude. What it is it keeps you small. It appeals to your smaller side. If you talk about it from the lens of I am going through something, and because of those challenges, I am using them to turn the situation into something new, to create something new out of it, to build something new because of it, then suddenly you're in a different place. When you're a victim, you are really focusing on the despite aspect of it. And then the third would be the martyr, who just, continues suffering for the sake of suffering. And somehow that is going to give you, that's going to get you to a better place. And it just ends up like a record that just is on screeching at the end.
Yeah. I'll tell you the middle one, that victim, that's the one that scares me. That's the one that scares me, Michele, because I think we all know, I sort of quietly refer to them as professional victims, where the first time you hear this amazing story of the plumber or the principal or whoever it is, and you're shocked until you realize that the plot line keeps repeating itself. And one litmus test for it is, and I know someone fairly close to me who has struggles with this, is to say, and was there anything that you did? I mean, I did nothing. I did nothing wrong. And I've watching it for decades. I will tell you that I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I mean that. It's such a terrible and difficult way to go through life. And
Yeah, it's a
so I'm
form of
glad that
hell.
you're writing about it and talking about it, because most people are unconsciously incompetent. They don't wake up going, I feel like being a victim today. They just are, and they can't see it. And it's debilitating.
Well, and to that point, it really becomes your identity. Because what happens if who are you if you take away that grievance? You have completely sold yourself, sold your spirit, sold your soul out to this grievance, that if you let it go, then who are you and what do you have?
Right.
And so it becomes, you double down on it that much more, because if you lose that grievance, you lose your identity.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting, because I have noticed sometimes when I really dug in and decided and coached somebody and decided, by golly, by gosh, we're fixing that one today. And I mean, I'm ready, and I got a process, and we fix it. It's instantaneously we just land on another lily pad of another plot line. It basically repeats itself. It's like, oh no, there's a reserve of these in the tank, sort of waiting to come up. So obviously, the solution isn't let's just fix that specific issue. It's more of that whole victim mentality piece. I would assume that really needs to be approached.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that I see in my practice has been, and research has been, that people try to, when adversity comes, they see it as a problem to be solved, or a fight to conquer. And the problem is, and or something to just manage. So like if there's a conflict or it's like, I need to solve this problem. As you just said, I need to get to the next lily pad, and and when you are dealing with meaningful challenge and adversity in your life, meaningful loss, things that like really affect who you are, whether that's your core values or sacred beliefs or identity, it's not like a quick solution here. And I look at it through a transformative lens, something to takes, and this goes back to what I said about because of versus despite. I know it sounds like semantics, but it's really an important distinction, because rather than taking the challenge and just trying to find a short-term solution that addresses what you think is the issue, it's like that's not going to work, and it's unsustainable. And managing it just tries to put a pot on a boil, like a cover on a boiling pot. It's just going to constantly do this. You really need to go into it and find kernels of truth in that adversity, little messages, meanings, insights that are true, even if they're not happy ones. Like, I'll give you an example. Someone wiser than me once said, some things are just sad. That's not a happy, spin on something. Some things are just sad. But it gives you that little insight or meaning, gives you something to use to go forward. Meaning, if you had a relationship that went bad,
Look,
whether
Michelle,
that's
let me
yeah,
jump
yeah.
in. I'm going to give you a case study. I'll give you one,
Oh,
and
okay.
you attack it a little bit, because
Okay,
it's
sure.
I volunteer for the last 15 years with people who are in career transition,
Oh, okay.
and usually the ones that I'm working with are somewhat chronic. It's big. It's a big issue. I'm not dealing with a whole lot of 25-year-olds. It's an older workforce. There's ageism concerns, but there's that victim mentality, that big bad company, that horrible manager, that bad team, and they can't get out of that mindset. So it's just blocking their pathway of, I did nothing. It was all the company, and uh, and every question. It's almost like talking to somebody who's been through a divorce. You hear the story the first 3 or 4 times, and you almost want to say, "I get it. Not a nice spouse. Can we move on from it?" But they can't. It just holds them there. Work with that one a little bit if you could.
Sure. And I think this goes back to what you were just talking about with the victim mindset, which is, so the first thing I would say was what I said before, which is that it's an identity thing and people don't
Yeah.
want to get out of it. So one of the things that happens in a situation like you just said, this is a career transition. They've lost, this is whether they've lost their job, they've aged out of a job, there's all kinds of reasons. Well, that actually does affect who you are and how you see yourself in the world. And what ends up happening a lot when identity gets called into question in a situation is that people end up getting stuck in certain timeframes. So they'll just, for instance, they'll focus on the past. It's like, I just can't get out of the past. So and so harmed me. I was this wonderful person. Now I'm not, and they forget, they're not thinking about what they can do right now and what they could become going forward. Or conversely, they're so angry about what happened and they want to just forget what happened that they kind of focus on like an escapist strategy. The phrase "be here now" that is
Yes.
very popularized. well, it's almost like they make it into me here now. It's all about me. It's all about my grievance. It's all about, I'm going to then start engaging in compensatory rewards. So, you know what? I may spend a little more money because damn it, I deserve it. Or, I'm going to engage in risky behaviors. Because it's like somehow it's trying to satisfy and fill a hole in the now that really is about them. But they're not thinking about the past and they're not thinking about the future. It's just like, how can I make myself feel better now? Or else conversely, people get so fixated on the future that they're basically recreating the past in the bad way. So the things that might have gotten them into a situation or a challenge, they're just actually just saying, oh, well, this worked before, so I might as well, try it again. And so they can get stuck in two. But what most people don't do is see themselves in the fullness of time, in the past, present, and future. And so one of the things I talk about a lot is the concept of a coherent sense of time. And that is being able to see yourself fully in the past, present, and future. So you can essentially look at the past and you can honor it. You can say, well, here's all the wonderful things in this case, my career. I did, and I'm proud of these things. I'm really proud of these things, regardless of what bad things were done to me.
Yep.
But you can't take those away from me. I still feel good about them. And geez, okay, certain things are gone. Some things are just sad, to use that thing. I need to be able to acknowledge that the human condition and life isn't perfect. And I'm not perfect. Other people aren't perfect. The world isn't perfect. And some things happen to good people for no good reason. And, good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people,
Right.
And it's not fair, but it is a truth.
Right.
And so being able to find kernels of truth that in that past that you can then say, okay, how do I carry those into the present? How can I how can I have those kernels help me fuel something that I can do now? So it takes away that victim feeling. It takes away the powerlessness. And it helps me actually stay in a rational mind, stay in stay in my body in a way that doesn't have my nervous system flying off the hook, so that, flying out the window, so that I'm just like a nervous ball of energy, and just saying, okay, what can I mindfully do now to change the situation? What do I want the situation to be? And then looking at the future and saying, okay, well, my story isn't over. Just because this terrible thing happened, I'm still here. I'm still looking in the mirror. I still have to eat. I still have a family, and I still wanted to do things in my life. So what do I now? What new story can I create out of the past, for a future that's more meaningful? And that may be having to shift some identities. And I think, a lot of times we get stuck in like, okay, what 7 things can I do on a checklist in a day to, change a career? I'm going to call this person, that person, this person. And you're stuck in the weeds, as opposed to just kind of looking at the big picture to say, okay, who am I now? How am I showing up to the world? Who am I presenting? What are the things I want to hold on to? What are the things I want to change? What are the things I want to be open to changing? So it's being able to move through those time periods, with a level of intention and mindfulness.
I really like that, by the way. I'm a process guy, so I may be guilty of that 7 things every now and then, but I do like the way you've sort of broken that out a little bit to those 3 quadrants in a sense. Holding on to air, the art and science of building a resilient spirit. That's the name of the book. It's available at all different bookstores, online, etc. I know that it just came out January 9th, so congratulations. That's you're still nesting. It's still fresh and exciting for you.
It
I couldn't
is.
be happier.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's, welcome to the family. This is a Barrett
Yeah, I was just
Kohler
gonna
author, by
say.
the way. Yeah. So Barrett Kohler authors get treated just a little bit better on this show. So
I love it.
you got the right, you got the right publisher. You know what's interesting, to your point, and I am just an amateur at what you're talking about, but one of the things I do in that specific space that I mentioned of people in career transition is, I want them to find something. I even call it my 90-10 rule. The other party is 90% responsible. That's a huge number. Bad company, bad. Just give me 10% of what you learned that you do differently the next time. And that's challenging for the victim mentality, but if they hang in there, they can get it. And the reward is they tend to, but we can now use the word evolve. We can now use the word, you see, we got something from that. It's a bit freeing for them. And it's worked in a very amateur way for me. It's something I really dig into because then we can get it behind us a little bit. I was raised, when I was raised, my dad had this saying, used it all the time. And I loved it until I got a little bit older, and I still love it. I just added to it. His phrase from when I was 4 years old was, no matter what happened, get it behind you. You got to get that behind you. Get it behind you. I'm looking at a therapist right now who's having a conversation with me. Hang on. You're probably going, how did that work? Very well for a 4-year-old, by the way. What I amended it to was figure out the lesson. And I think that's what you're writing about. Figure out what you were supposed to learn from this. And then, you're obviously adding more to it, but then we can essentially start working at getting it behind us. But we can't just magically break out a wand and go, well, you know what? Let's not think about it anymore and get it behind us. That's how we get an ulcer.
Well, okay, so I'm going to say something. So first of all, I agree with you. I'm going to say something that might sound controversial, but nonetheless, which
Love it.
is I actually think it's okay to engage the notion of getting it behind you, meaning you're no longer holding it in here.
Yeah.
So I think, I know it's like, no, we just need, I appreciate what you're saying about the dismissive, what is often perceived as like a dismissiveness to a challenge or whatever the issue is. And it's like, yeah, just don't think about it, just put it behind you, just move on, forget it. Well, that doesn't, that's not going to work. Maybe if the person driving down the street, gives you the finger and on the highway and you get angry for a minute, then you can forget about it, but when it's something meaningful, that's just not going to work. So it's not, but to the victim point or the martyr point, or the survivor point, there has to come a time when you feel like you can turn and look at, the past and allow it to be the past and make it time again, back to the differences between the times. So if, you can't not go through it.
Right.
You
Right.
can try not to go through it, but it never works. So you're
Right.
just better off. Well, I'll tell you one of the things. So in this book, I present two paths. What, like basically meaningful challenge and loss leave you, like pull the rug out from underneath your life. You go falling down, and then you lay there in the fetal position and go, shit. Excuse me. I don't know how to. I don't know how to get up. But I need to get back up. And so when you find yourself trying to stand around, you're kind of feeling like a stranger in a strange new world where nothing looks the same and everything's different. So it's like, so you can't just stay stuck there. You need to move. So, metaphorically, two paths emerge.
Right.
One I called back in blue, because it's the path that you go down when you try to recreate what you had before the challenge, loss, adversity. And really, if you're trying to recreate it, it's an effort in futility. Things have changed, you've changed, and you can never get back the exact thing that you had before. And it's just, unfortunately, that is also a kernel of truth. And so the second path, the path of resilience, is about getting lost to being found. So you have to enter into a certain level of uncertainty about you know, not being, knowing that you can't control all outcomes in life, but that you can take command of yourself in any moment, to help you work through that kind of difficult uncertainty that, these kinds of meaningful challenge and loss, leave us in.
Got it. You use the word resilience a lot. Let's just make sure everybody knows how you, as the author here, define resilience.
Sure. I've looked at a number of definitions. The one that I feel like is most human, is that resilience is the capacity to rally from life's trials and tribulations, strengthened by the experiences, and better equipped to live fully, love deeply, and weather future crises with poise. And in this way, resilience kind of ensures that change and challenge improve rather than hurt our lives. And it fortifies rather than weakens our spirit. Resilience helps us to see that difficulties, don't need to leave us eternally damaged, which is something that a lot of folks kind of don, that a persona they don is like everything I am forever damned, is essentially.
That sounds like the
So
martyr group to me.
yes, very much
Okay.
so. So resilience helps us to see that difficulties don't leave us eternally damaged, just temporarily challenged.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
yeah.
And how, sometimes I've always wanted to start a podcast called A Book Finds You because we don't find it. How did you develop this passion, this desire to kind of go in this direction and write about this? Why this particular topic?
That's an interesting one. The short answer is that I've been, from the time, as long as I can remember, from the time I was young, I've been interested in life's big questions, kind of the big existential questions. And I decided when I was going to college that I would study world religion and ethics, comparative culture, conflict, psychology, just basically anything that I could, that speaks to the human condition and how people use their beliefs and principles, their rituals, practices, identity, community, for either good or ill. And I spent a lot of time looking at resilience, how the world's wisdom traditions, both spiritual and secular, look at resilience, how people, like I said, how they use things for good or, good or ill. And I started thinking, well, maybe I'll write like a small handbook for grief and loss or something. Like I kind of started having this, the framework that I was talking about, what I was talking about with the 3 time frames, and is, I refer to it as the HTC model. It's honor the past, transform the present, and craft a new story for the future. And so, that had been kind of developing when I was doing my master's degrees. And so I graduated, and quite literally on the heels of finishing conceiving this book, starting to write it, I woke up on June 30th feeling like an elephant was standing on my chest. And so I basically, the short story is that I had 2 heart attacks in 1 week.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
yeah,
Wow.
when I was 33. And exactly. So I was otherwise very healthy, exercise, don't fit the part, the typical part. It's interesting we're talking about this because February, February is Heart Health Month, so interesting that we're kicking it off today. But yeah, I woke up feeling like, I was having a stampede of elephants on my chest. And I didn't think it was, I wouldn't have thought heart attack. Nobody in my family's had heart attacks. I was 33, young, and didn't fit the profile. So I waited. So I finally went to the hospital after a few hours of feeling this way, turned around in the parking lot, convinced myself that I was better, and then waited 72 hours before going back, and basically stumbled into the ER where people did a EKG, and the next thing I know, everything and everyone was
Wow.
crazy. And so, and they didn't know. So what's interesting is that they didn't know why it was happening. And then they found out later it was something called a spontaneous coronary arterial dissection, which basically means it's a tear in your coronary arteries.
Yep.
So anyway, and then, so I was in the ICU for a week, and then they let me go. And then 3 days later, it happened again. And that was a worst one. And some of this is chronicled in the book because and the reason I mention it is because suddenly I had that same experience that I was studying, and it was like, oh, well, you think you know something? You better try this out yourself, girl, because if you're going to be actually telling people and advising and trying to help, people with some of the most difficult challenges and times of their life, well, you better, here's your chance to really see if it works.
There you
And,
go.
I'll be honest with you, it was really hard. Like I have used this book and this framework in my mind in the decade out since, and I go back to it. I open it and say often, Michele, what are you trying to do to me? But it does work, and I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in other people's lives, and I'm it's just that's why I wrote the book.
I'm really glad you told that story, and I hope in the book, I wasn't your editor, but I hope that comes out early, like the preface.
It does.
That's a lot of times people will kind of confuse the introduction and the preface and the forward, but the preface is usually the part where we say, here's why I'm writing. I'm going to tell you this story. Introduction, I'm going to tell you, what this book is about, but here's my part of it. And so I'm really glad you had an opportunity to talk about that, because I think that really helps. You're not a casual observer sitting on the sidelines. You're living some of this. So that's powerful.
Well, thank you for saying that. One of the things I will say is that when I wrote, so the beginning of the book starts out with, I was 33 years old when my biggest fear became a reality, and here's what,
Yeah.
and so, but I didn't want to be that detached researcher that, kind of distant therapist who's citing case studies of other, the anonymous Ben or, Sophie or something that has these things. That was like, if I wanted readers to trust that this book was that they could trust me, I needed to share that with them. Not just the, some successes, but actually the challenges.
Right.
So that they know that I'm in the trenches with them.
Yeah, no, I think that's for me, that's where the credibility as a reader, once I get that, I'm locked in. I love the fact that you're a therapist. I love the fact that you're working with people on a regular basis on this, but to experience the emotional side of this yourself and not be detached, as you just said, to me, adds the credibility to it. Now, that's why we're going to run to that bookstore and we're going to be getting that book, and we're writing reviews on that book once you tunnel into it. But I just think that really is powerful. I almost wish I'd started with that question, but I'm glad that we unearthed it. We're coming down the home stretch. I've got one more question for you, and I don't always end a podcast this way, but for you, I'm definitely going to ask this question. Okay, we've got people that are listening. I don't think most people sit there and go, I don't agree with this woman. They're in agreement. The problem is, and this is the trainer in me, we can talk, and then there's the part about implement. So in your best 90 seconds or so I'm going to put you on the clock. Not really, but sort of. Something that people can do right now when they get done walking the dog, wherever you are, right? These people are right now listening. Something that they could do to become more resilient. Maybe one or two things they could immediately go to.
Can I answer it different? Because I've got 7 things.
And you can only pick a couple. Yes.
I know. Well, the reason is, and the only reason I'm saying this is because I think it might be more helpful. So I have 7 pillars of resilience, essentially.
You're the star of the show today. You take us through. Go ahead.
And I'm happy to, on my website, they're listed. There's a nice little infographic. If people are interested, they can
What's
go
that
to
website again? I forgot the name of it.
michelledemarco.com. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll hit it again and we'll spell it out for you in just a minute. So hang tight. All right, I'm going to let you go, but see if you can do this and, pretend you're on stage right now. You got to net it out. Let's hear it.
Okay. Pillar 1, patience. Patience is not just enduring misery. It's learning to live with uncertainty, and it's being able to endure with an even pace, with moderation, so that you're conserving your internal resources, that keeps you moving forward. Also, that you're doing so with perspective. You're keeping your eyes wide open, your heart open, and this is super important for patience. Curiosity. You have to stay curious. Lots more to say on this, but in the interest of time, meaning making. You need to find those kernels of truth, what I was talking about before, those things that give us a way to, things that are insights and about what is, like getting at the really is, that you can hold and carry with you. Pillar 3, love and connectedness. You need to reach out and let trusted others in. And this is actually something I feel really strongly about. A lot of times people, when they are in difficult situations, maybe I'll just give you 3, but this one is important. Reaching out and letting other people in, trusted other people in, when you're in a difficult, when you're going through adversity, is super important. It's not usually the thing we want to do, because we often feel that everybody else and everything else looks normal, but we don't. That stranger in a strange land thing I was talking about.
Yep.
And so, but what ends up happening a lot of times is relationships change during things, because you're changing, the way you look and what you value is changing, and you're just reassessing things. So kind of testing the waters with new people that you may not be that aren't really trustworthy, or you really need to have your base, and to rely on other people.
Yeah.
There's
And
a few
remember,
others that are super good.
sure there are. We want
But
people
I
buying the
will-
book. You got to buy the book to get the other 4. And
Got it.
when you get that book, all 7 of them are slowed down a little bit. You don't have Rob riding roughshod going quicker and faster. But I'm glad that you just settled on 2 or 3, because it allows that. It's like a wine. Let's let that breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
I immediately connected to the 3rd one for me that you mentioned, because I lived what you said. I don't think I've ever mentioned this ever, really, but I guess it was about 15 years ago. We had a fire. No one was hurt. No one was harmed, but it was significant enough. We were out of our house for a year. So you close your eyes and figure out what that fire looked like. And to your point, I was almost annoyed initially when people, not the A+ listers, just people who knew me, wanted to do something. And I was actually almost antagonized, like, you want to do something? In my head, don't talk to me about it. But some of them just bashed through the wall anyhow, and basically said, I had people that came in and just took our laundry, and went and did the laundry. People showed up with food, to all sorts of things. And Michele, it changed my life. It changed the way I looked at things, because again, my instinct was to put up a wall. And the reality was that people really genuinely wanted to help. And it was a great lesson for me. I'm not so afraid anymore to let people help. Now, look, if you say you're going to do something, you don't. Okay, lesson learned. But my instinct is completely the opposite now. I think that if people reach out a hand, I'm glad to grab it. And that was not my first move. And I had to live through a mild form of trauma to learn that. If I had gotten your book, I would have had it figured out.
Well, thank you for saying. I do think that the people often see asking for, just reaching out, as a weakness,
Right.
as if somehow that's not, somehow that makes us smaller. And it's like, folks, we are relational beings. We cannot operate by ourselves. In isolation that much. And you know what? If somebody else was in the same situation? Wouldn't you want, wouldn't your instinct be to help and reach out to them too? This is where you go back to like the reciprocity aspect of trusted others, where it's like, I help you, you help me. I'm reaching out. It's okay to ask, and it actually makes you stronger. It's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I say I think our instinct's a little off. That's
Yeah.
why what a good book does is it basically pokes a hole and says, so you want to go to the left? You like left? Is that where you like? I'm going to prove to you going to your right is a smarter move. That's when we learn. But our instinct is off on a few of these points that you've made. They're very logical. They're just not instinctive. And that's why we need help from time to time. Just terrific. I really got a lot out of this conversation. Tell me how people get a hold of you. And I already saw your list. This woman has 19 different things that she's involved in. You can pick a couple of ways so people can get a hold of you. And I promise you, we'll put on the website, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the different pieces you have. Give me just a couple for somebody listening.
Yeah, I think the easiest way is to go to my website, which is my name, Michele DeMarco. It's Michele with one L and DeMarco with a DE, .com. You can learn more about me there. You can reach out to me there. I don't spam, but I do send out stuff if people are interested in newsletters and updates and actually resources. I send resources out sometimes. And if somebody wants to get me directly, they can reach out to Outreach, the email. You can email me at outreach@micheledemarco.com.
Right. That's DeMarco, DeMarco, and Michele with one L. Absolutely outstanding. Well, really appreciate having the conversation with you. I've absolutely found it enlightening, and I'm grateful you had an opportunity. As a fellow BK author, I'm pulling for you. I wish you all the luck in the world. You got to start with a good engine, and you've got a great concept. Sounds like a great book. I'm going to get a hold of a copy because, I don't buy them all, by the way, but I'm getting hold of this one because I like a good verified review book, and so I'm running out. I'm going to go get myself a copy. I hope everyone else does too. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Really appreciate it, Michele.
Oh, Rob, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
You
so
bet.
enjoyed talking to you.
Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.